Honorable from Microsoft Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this resolution and to lend my voice to this debate, in many ways to support some things that have already been said, but if I might, to also put this area and this conversation in context with respect to the many development issues that we face. This discussion, this debate, sir, is not simply one about water and sanitation infrastructure. It is not simply one about debt and the levels of debt that can be tolerated by a developing country. It is a debate, sir, ultimately about how we manage development in a country of this size, in a country that is enduring with the rest of the world a poly-crisis, a crisis of climate and environment, a crisis of population, in many respects, a crisis of democracy and democratic governance, a crisis of peace and tolerance. And all these things, from this honorable place, from this small island, we have to navigate every day. These are not esoteric issues, Mr. Speaker. This is not academic. This is not about numbers. This is not about big words. This is about how do we provide day by day by day for the people of this country. But not only that, how do we finally demonstrate that moral and innovative leadership is possible from a country the size of ours in this part of the world with the history that we have endured? All of these issues converge here in this resolution today. It may not seem like they do, but they do. The Honourable Member for St. Michael South, in his intervention, made reference to this earlier. Sir, there was a time when the climate conversation was just about the science. There was a lot of work, and sir, we have Nobel Prize winners from this country who contributed to that conversation and to that experimentation and to that research to understand what was going on with the climate, but further to that, how would it affect people in our part of the world? The world is now waking up to what we have been experiencing for some time. One of the reasons that we talk so much about loss and damage with respect to climate is that we are now experiencing the effects of historic loss and damage. So while the wildfires and the floods and the droughts all over the world are happening now because the world is now meeting us where we are, we have been enduring these effects for some time. But I recall, sir, when I worked on these issues as an international civil servant in multilateral development banks or in the UN system, and we were told that if you want to get financing related to climate, related to environment, or related to disaster risk reduction, you can't come talking about poverty or economic security. They will tell us in this part of the world, sir, but Barbados is a middle-income country. What, you don't have any poverty, so we can't give you money for that. And when we would come to say, well, we're being affected adversely by climate and by industrial decisions being made in your part of the world, they would tell us, but you have to make the climate argument. You have to show us the science, they would say, of what you want to do. So in other words, you can't come and get money to invest in your infrastructure. That's not climate. You can't come and get money to replace water mains. That's not climate, they said to us in the year 2000, in the year 1998. They would say to us, where is the science? We will give you money for wetlands. We will give you money for biodiversity. But if you're talking infrastructure, if you're talking roads and bridges and the fact that you have become indebted because you have had to repair 3 and 4 times the same bridge that was destroyed by different hurricanes that are increasing in intensity because of climate, they would say to us, that is infrastructure. That is not climate. And I was there at those tables in those conversations 20, 25 years ago, sir. Although I may not look it, but I was there. When these conversations were happening at the time. And they would say to us, climate is not development, and as much as we said at the top of our lungs, from the depth of our souls, on behalf of the people of this part of the world, as much as we would say, but climate is affecting us. And in fact, when the fish go to other waters, the fisher folk in Dominica and in Barbados and in Grenada lose their livelihoods. And that is this is a matter of survival. They would say climate is not development. I still have the emails, sir. I go back and look at them from time to time. Because I must always be able to reflect and be reminded of how far we have come. This conversation did not begin this year. It did not even begin in 2018. We have been advocating as a country, led by Grenada, led by Barbados. We have been advocating and pleading for some time. But guess what? What changed the conversation? The conversation changed when Barbados was able to say to the rest of the world, look, this small money that y'all come in with will not suffice. In 2021, sir, when I had the distinction of leading the financing negotiations on behalf of the Alliance of Small Island States at the Glasgow Climate Summit, I think that at that time I was perhaps the only minister with responsibility for economic affairs in the conversation, and people asked, well, where's your Minister of Environment? All of the other ministers of environment who were there, and ministers of climate and ministers of, said, but why are you here? This is a climate discussion. And ultimately, we had to say, the reason that we are here is to tell you that your small money for quote unquote humanitarian assistance isn't going to help us. Because what you want to do as the North, as the global North, as developed countries, is to wait until we are on our knees after a hurricane, trying to find medicine, trying to rebuild, trying to get our children back in school, trying to make sure our hospital is in shape, trying to make sure that our equipment that will save lives has not been destroyed. You want then to come in on your white horse and save the day with a little fine change. But sir, a little fine change would not suffice. The UNFCCC, the UN body that's responsible for all these climate negotiations and the world's climate response, decided that they would put aside $100 billion a year to try and help out these countries that are bothering them and complaining that we are adversely affected by climate. However, when we add up the numbers, we realize that in fact, that would not fill the gap at all. If you ask the member from Christchurch East who spoke earlier, at the time that he was responsible for water, what would it have costed us to do the work, to replace the mains, to be able to invest in the sanitation for the entire island understanding that only a very small percentage of the island is actually hooked up to a sewage plant. It would have been on the order of hundreds of millions, as it is today. And so it took Barbados to say a few things. And where did this start? In 2021, in Glasgow, we said, look, the International Monetary Fund has something that they call special drawing rights. It is kind of like money, but not really. But it has the capacity to be able to unlock trillions. But there are many countries that don't need theirs. So can we find a way to take that money, because we know that to build what we need to build to withstand this crisis is on the order of trillions. So take some of that money and try and redirect it. And the international community sat up and said, there's an idea. And we got it into the decision in 2021. That was the start. Out of that conversation came the Bridgetown Initiative. But even all during that time, what else did we say? We said that if we do have a hurricane, if we do have a slow onset event like some of this rain that is just dripping, 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 and eventually is going to erode your road infrastructure, because not everything happens after a hurricane, you know. We have extreme weather events that are not going to trigger the little parametric insurance that they have there through CRIF. There's not even going to trigger that, because the way that they measure what is a disaster is a different way. So it doesn't have to be a hurricane, but there are ways in which we are affected. And we said that if we get a hurricane, well, we can't wait until after we are hit to go and try flying about the world begging for money. We need to make sure that we have access to money after the hurricane. And that's why we were able to get natural disaster clauses in our debt. And I say these things not because I care to repeat things that have already been explained, but I say these things to make it clear that these conversations that we have at the global level are not because we like to talk. They're because they really end up having benefits for the people of this country. Because guess what? If there's a hurricane and we still have to pay back debt, principal and interest, that means that we can't spend it on medicine. We can't spend it on securing the population. We can't spend it on rebuilding schools. And that's what those natural disaster clauses are about. And so bit by bit, we were the ones who had to show the world, look, we have the answers that y'all haven't been able to come up with. Barbados has developed and can demonstrate the answers. And that's why the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast, the Honourable Prime Minister, was able to talk about the European Investment Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank actually now using what we've developed to replicate and be able to apply in other parts of the world. After we developed the natural disaster clauses, the IDB said, well, actually, you know, we can put this in some of our instruments. And they came back with a way of doing that. And so we don't stand here to brag and say, look at what we've done because we want to pass an exam. We do it because, one, it brings benefits to the people of Barbados, but also, two, it brings benefits to other countries like us. You know, one of the things that I have realized in this work of political service is that you don't help anything if you only do for yourself. You gotta bring the rest. Because guess what? If we are hit by a hurricane in this region and Barbados is the only people that are able to survive, we still have to disperse our efforts because we gotta go and help Grenada and we gotta go and help Dominica. Let's start now by making these things available to benefit everyone. So that, sir, has been the trajectory of the climate conversation. It started out on the science, and then it ended up on the finance and the governance. But this need for innovative instruments, sir, I dare say, does not start and end with climate, and we have to take the lessons from the climate conversation. Because the next frontier of inequality globally is going to be the digital divide. It already is. But I fear that we are in danger of addressing the digital divide in the same way that we stumble about in the dark on climate until we finally came to the understanding that we have to do things differently. Why do I say that? Because I am hearing conversations now about how the way to bridge the digital divide between the global north and the global south, the fact that the north is originating all the technology, is selling all the technology, is being able to benefit first from advances in artificial intelligence. Sir, we have walked this path before. In all the industrial revolutions that came before, it was people that look like how we in here finally look, that were on the side of being the ones who lagged behind, not only who lagged behind, but on whose backs other people got wealthy. If we look at what is happening in technology today, we stand the risk of having this technological industrial revolution follow that same pathway. Those who are now having conversations about the fact that countries like ours are way behind in technological advancement are trying to set up the same $100 billion a year fund that they tried to set up for climate. They're trying to have the conversation about the technology only and not about the global governance of how we get access to these things. And our responsibility is to be able to show to the world, let us not repeat the mistakes of the last 3 decades that we did with climate when it comes to issues of technology and artificial intelligence and access to that finance and access to that learning, access to those jobs. Let us make sure that we are able to start on a level playing field. Sir, this country will hear me from today and over the next several days and weeks say a lot of things about this sector and how it affects us. But the one thing I do want to say today is that there was a time, sir, when if you worked in programming, if you worked in computers, to access a computer, the primary way you did that was through a punch card. You access a computer with a punch card, and then you printed out something on paper. And you had a card reader and printer and CPU and disk drives and all of these things. And most of the interaction with those systems was physical. So you had to go into a room, and it was a big server room, and it was huge, and you would go into a room and you would put in something, and the only people that would have access were the 4 or 5 people in that company, in that institution, that had the card. But sir, we are no longer in that time. And countries like ours have to make the investments to make sure that our infrastructure can withstand the fact that anybody, anywhere in the world can access it. So when we bring cybercrime legislation that is new to this time, because the old Computer Misuse Act was not, when we bring a mutual assistance in criminal matters legislation to this place, when we handle the 2 breaches that we have had recently, and when we respond to an outage that took place, because we have to make more investments, not just in the systems, but in the people with the capacity to do what is required to keep our systems intact. What we are discussing here today, sir, is a sustainability-linked bond. But eventually, and sooner than we think, we are going to have to look at digital transformation-linked bonds. And why? Because we are now catching up, not just to underinvestment in the sector from the previous decade, but the fact that it is moving so quickly. So, sir, this is not just a conversation about climate and water and sanitation. This is a conversation about development and the wherewithal to make it happen. When we say that government is building a Tier 3 data center over 3 years, that is not to say that we're starting and ending there tomorrow. It means that it is a journey. It means that first we have to secure the infrastructure that we currently have, and in a modular way, be able to build out and build out and build out so that we are secure. You know, sir, sometimes I think that people believe that we say these things because we like to go and find ways to spend money. But the irony that the same legislation, and it's not to say that we are not concerned with protecting freedoms. In everything we do, we are. It is there in the Constitution and will never be removed. But the irony that at the same time that is being attacked in disingenuous ways, the country is fighting to maintain security, literally at the same moment. So we have to get serious about what we want, because we can't have it on the left and on the right too. But more and more, we are going to have to realize that we are on a journey here. And the things that we need to be competitive and to be safe and to be productive and to create opportunities for our people, the things that we need to do today are not things that we could have done or needed to do 20 years ago. The kinds of financial instruments that we have here today and that we need today, like this swap, are required because this is a different time. And I feel as if the individual on the other side, because I can't say people, seems not to understand that there was once a time when we would have gone outside with a chicken board and blue soap. Well, I still like to use blue soap because I don't think anything replaces that. But no, we don't do that. We have to change the approaches in order to respond to the times in which we exist. And so, sir, I will have conversations with the country about this journey, but it is a journey where it is not just about government. We are most vulnerable when a person goes into an email and says that they think comes from a bank or comes from a colleague and clicks a link that says, update your information here, and go in and put in their bank information, but actually that is not the bank. Within institutions and outside of institutions. That is one of the very present dangers. And so, sir, you will see the country might get tired of me. But you will see and hear me and others talking about how we have to secure ourselves. And these things will happen from time to time. We have to make sure that we have the wherewithal to respond. Sir, we have a police service, and we have a defense force, and we have doors and windows with locks and alarm systems and cameras. A person who is sufficiently motivated by the wrong things still breaks in. So we have to make sure that we do as much as we can to keep them out. Hence the investments that we will need to be making in the coming weeks and months. But we also have to make sure that if they do manage somehow to get through, that we are able to respond. So before I close, I also have to address something else that I think those on the other side are being disingenuous about. And the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central, who led this resolution at the appropriate time, will also speak about some of the economic performance issues. But I keep hearing this notion. There's false information being presented on the debt, a failure to realize that we were at 176% debt to GDP and now we're at 105%. And the debt is not increasing. Somehow they want to blank that narrative. But the other thing that I hear recently is this notion that we are not spending and our capital expenditure is less than it has ever been, and it was higher under the Democratic Labour Party and all kinds of things. Sir, I brought this information in this honourable place before. Forgive me if I have to repeat myself. Because the fact is that over the 10 years of a Democratic Labour Party government, over 10 years, the total capital expenditure was $1,800 million. Over 10 years. Over 6 years of this Barbados Labour Party administration, the total capital expenditure was $1,835 million over 6 years. Sir, the average capital expenditure since we have been in service as a government has been $306 million compared to their average of $180 million over 10 years. Sir, I only come here to correct the record. I ain't come here to put on my ribbons and my fancy boots and prance up like the honourable leader of the opposition, the dressage horse. I only come here humbly to correct what has been put on the record by people who don't know better, and I forgive that, you know. I always tell my teams, I will never get upset for gaps in capacity or understanding, but I will get upset if you misrepresent to people what is the truth. Sir, we are not in ordinary times, but we have the extraordinary talent and capacity for work and for thinking and for execution that will get us to the next generation. I commend this resolution to this House, and I look forward to the different ways in which this kind of innovative approach will not just benefit this sector that we are discussing, but will continue to benefit us in digital transformation, in social transformation, and in all the parts of development with which we must be concerned. Sir, I'm obliged to you.